first Portuguese Cocktails and Spirits conference where the spirits experts meet and meet. We don't know nothing about this, but the experts will be doing all the talking. I know it's early, but we want to catch everyone sober, so if it goes wrong, we can all drink afterwards to forget it. So it's a win-win situation. Everyone sober here so far? Yes? See? Ninguém bebeu uns copos a mais? No? Okay, well. So it's going to be a 1 hour and a half of a live session where mixology and whiskey's future will be discussed amongst a group of international experts. It's going to be split in 2 parts. Mixology first and whiskey's after. We separated them, but they go well together because Because the whiskey people are sitting in front and they get along. You are all friends, right? No, mais ou menos. Sometimes. For those who don't know me, my name is Pedro Fernandes. I'm 40 years old and I'm an alcoholic. I drink with moderation, and you all should do the same. Except, of course, if you want to increase sales, you should get drunk. You know. I would like to thank Prime Drinks, of course, for organizing this conference, and the Garrafeira Soares, who made it possible as part of the Algarve trade experience. I guess this means they offered the bottles, so thanks a lot. Garrafeira Soares, big applause for them. Yeah. At the end of each part, you will be able to place some questions to the panel. Just go to slido.com. I think, yeah, you have that information there. And you have the event password, of course, too. Is there the password there? Yeah? Events, is that the password? Event? The hashtag? Yeah? Okay. Hashtag the Spirits Summit. So you can go there, register, and you can ask questions to the panel, the whole panel, or individually. Just refer the name to the person you want to ask the question. So, with no further delay, let's start with the first panel, Mixology. And for this panel, please welcome Coco from Hendrick's Gin. Hello, Coco! That's my chair, Coco.
Oh, it's comfortable. Oh.
I'm kidding, you can sit wherever you want. Simone Bodini from Stoli Group, not only vodka. Right? I'm gonna be, yeah. Yeah, you can, yeah. Freddy May from Drambuie Liquor. Hello, Freddy. We have to do this like we never saw each other before. Gravy Thomas from Sailor Jerry Spiced Rum. And Malika Saidi from Lucas Bols Liquors. Hello, Malika. Your chair. So you are all presented. Welcome. Welcome to Portugal. Feeling good? You have only 3 microphones. You should pass them around when you want to. Or still. Good voice, good radio voice, I know you have. So, we talked earlier about some topics we should talk about here, because we had too many topics and we wouldn't have time to talk about everything. So we're going to start talking about trends and how storytelling is becoming more and more a trend. People don't want just a brand, they want the story behind the brand. Is that right? How do you feel about it? Who wants to start?
I'll take it. You know, when you're nervous on doing something, the best thing to do is do it.
Yeah.
So I'll take it. I'll take the first shot. Thank you for being here, first of all. Obrigado por todos. This is a very interesting topic, actually, and it could be very long. You know, I always like to mention that when I started to be a bartender, things were slightly different from today.
You had hair?
Yes, I had some hair, which is hard to believe, but yes, that was the case. You know, we used to really read books and talk to each other instead of doing this all day long.
Yeah.
And the bartending scene was way different. I mean, you were capable to make a mojito and you were a rock star. Nowadays, with the new generation, the level of culture and the development of the bar culture is huge. You guys know how to make cocktails. That when I was, you know, first time I heard the word Sazerac, I was like, why are you speaking with me in Arabian? I was like, wow.
To me, it's still Arabian. What is that?
It's kind of a very fancy cocktail from kind of a century ago or more.
Not that fancy.
And but nowadays we live in this globalized world, and this is a very fast-moving visual world. And bartenders are, they really playing with. You guys do things that for me were insane. You use rotovapor. You know how to clarify things. You know how to take the color out of something. You're playing with the eyes, with the visual part of the drink. But storytelling is. I think we all agree on this already. It's so crucial because, we are submerged by pictures. Instagram is working so good because we don't even have patience to stay on a story for more than 3 seconds. It's all visual, but how can you attract someone in your bar? How can you, and this we will probably, I'm talking a lot, I will pass the word, but...
No, you're not, it's interesting.
How can you really take somebody out of his comfort zone? How can you make him wish to try something new in a world where we are submerged of options? But sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's not really good.
But there's two moments, I think. That's the storytelling when you sell a story behind your brand, but then there's that moment in the bar where the bartender also plays a very important role, of course.
Well, I think that's the element of talking with someone or talking to someone, right? In our brand ambassador world, we don't want to come off as, talking to. For me especially, I want to talk with. I come from storytelling, poetically, and being able to represent a brand where visually we're telling stories every day through the Sailor Jerry artwork and tattoo artwork, but then also being in the native land of rum agricole and rum itself, there are stories that need to be told that can complete the conversation and the mixology and the craft cocktail. And if you don't have that story and the basis, and I just think the hunger for legacy and heritage is way more important today than it has been ever, in terms of where this liquid comes from, why, and if there's something attainable I can attach to, that's going to make the bartender's job that much easier and enjoyable when making a cocktail, especially, again, representing a brand that represents the legacy of someone, gives them just another avenue to speak about, for sure.
I mean, you were talking about choices, and you mentioned heritage. I believe that for a very long time, the choices were very limited. Drinks became very, very fancy, very, very simple. And at a certain stage of our industry, bartenders started to do a lot of research, started to look at where we came from as a profession, started to take themselves very seriously because no one else did. And all of a sudden, you did find Sazeracs and old-fashioned and the martinis on the menu. And while our guests were confused and slightly nervous at the beginning, they learned to appreciate and to love those, rather old-fashioned, rather classic, more sophisticated cocktails. And I believe if we give them more choice and educate them on the variety and the diversity of what's possible to, in a glass, we make everyday bartending richer and more interesting.
There are some cocktails that never go out of fashion, right? You find them for so many years always on the menus, like Sex on the Beach and the Mojito. That's the kind of cocktail the guy orders when he's a teenager, to get her to, you want a Sex on the Beach?
But maybe because of a lack of knowledge. Maybe if they would see more classic cocktails on the menus, they would get used to them more, appreciate them more, and
then try something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For instance, do you know Pink Butterfly?
A tea.
A cocktail. Do you know? No? It worked for me. I got married. We got married because of that. Yeah. I was telling you my story because I began to drink cocktails because the bartender was a guy that really put on a show in the bar. And I wasn't a cocktail guy. I would drink beer and a cider maybe. And then he got me to drink cocktails because I enjoyed the show. And Pink Butterfly was one of them. I was serious. I don't know if he made it up or not, but it's really really worked. So what I was trying to get to is the bartender has a really important role on trying people to experiment new things, right?
I think that's right. It's a really important role to educate and also show the options that are there. Because as a guest in a bar, I think you're really, especially when you don't maybe necessarily have that much money to spend, you think, okay, I'll stick with what I know because I know it's good. And
yeah, because we know cocktails are more expensive.
Exactly.
So.
And I come from Holland, where our cocktail culture is just really developing now. We don't really have a really long cocktail culture. So for people to order a cocktail, it's kind of a big deal. It used to be anyway. So people need a little bit of encouraging and understanding what to expect before they decide to spend their money on it as well. And a bartender could definitely help in that area.
Like we find a lot of new cocktail bars or bars that specialize in cocktails now create stories through their menu, but in a way that when they change their menu, they change the story. No longer is it creating a cocktail menu based on just the ingredients or seasonality of ingredients or what your bar stands for, but people change menus sometimes 3 or 4 times a year on ethereal ideas, sometimes like literary ideas or based on music or themes around their cocktail menus. And of course, for the venues that specialize in cocktails, that's great because every time you change your menu, you can get more money from brands to do that. But those stories sell, and it's what we do with the booze industry. And when I started, the owner of the company at the time when he was alive, he said that we're selling dreams, and our job doesn't really matter because as long as the liquid is good.
You saw cocktails and dreams.
But with these bars making stories out of these menus, it's a really good marketing exercise for these places that are specializing cocktail bars. But what if you're a place that does not really specialize in cocktails? If you have other concepts, or if cocktails are not the main part of your sales, there's still a way that you can perhaps put stories into your list or the way that you sell cocktails. What is it you specialize in? Is there something that you can do really, really well? 1 or 2 drinks that become what you are known for as a restaurant or a bar or a venue to your customers?
Yeah, I mean, we all appreciate, all of us, I believe, going to a restaurant and getting a recommendation from the chef because he or she is an authority in the kitchen. So let's be an authority in the bar, okay? I mean, we as bartenders, brand ambassadors, have the opportunity to
responsibility.
And responsibility not only to set trends, but also to, be opinion makers. And I think if we become authorities in the bar, we will be taken more seriously, and also our drinks.
Yeah, it's also good to mention that I really like the psychological part of the approach to the bar. So why people come to your bar? There is only one reason: because of you. It's the only reason that they come to the bar is because of you. Because guess what? If I want to get drunk or if I want to drink something, I go to a grocery store, I buy a bottle. Nowadays with YouTube, I can be the best mixologist ever in my house because I can follow some tutorial and I can make my cocktail and I can enjoy it in my loneliness or with my friends. If I come to your bar, it's because I want to see your face, I want to see your smile, I want to listen to your stories. You need to bring me somewhere else because my life is full of stress, because I had a wrong day or I don't know what was going wrong with my day, and I'm coming to you to sit in front of you and tie off and dream and go somewhere else. Take me somewhere, some place that is exotic to me. Tell me a story. We all have an inner kid inside. We only forget this. What did you like when you were a kid? Your father or your mother telling you the story to go to sleep. This is ancestral for human beings. Tell them stories through your menu, through your speech. Engage them. It's not only the liquid. It's not only to clarify a spirit. It's not only to use a rot of vapor. It's not only technical skills. It's the romance. I'm Italian, so I love it. And drama.
You are making me want to be a bartender after this. But wasn't this passion that you have when you talk about the bartender profession that made you become a brand ambassador? Was it a bit a responsibility in that? No. So the way you talk about being a bartender, maybe that made you become a brand ambassador. The way you talk about it.
Of course. I mean, for me, as he mentioned, responsibilities. For me, I don't know if the question is this, but I will answer. So then you can tell me this one. It was another question, but I'm getting older. So for me, when I think about my role, it's nothing about showing off or living the rock star life, which I do. But it's a huge honor and pleasure to try to leave a little contribute to this scene and see people that are happy about what they do and to give them motivation to live their job with passion. He was mentioning before, you have to understand that you have a very good job. And you choose this job. When I choose this job, I've been a bartender for 20 years. When I said to my mother, I'm gonna quit studying at the university because I want to be a bartender, she wanted to kill herself. She was like, where did I go wrong? And still she thinks so.
And that ties into why I got into the business was hospitality. I don't come from the traditional bartender background. I come from the middleman, the liaison, the event promoter, bringing the audience to said bar with said palate and working with that bartender to recognize what drinks will be moving. And that was an element of hospitality that I brought to this, what I think I bring to the ambassador role within our portfolio at William Grant & Sons, is the other side of the bar. And I think I'm seeing a trend around the world where people are hanging their hat on a specific type of hospitality, whether it's the Irish bringing the old school Irish hospitality in a new school way, you know what I mean? Or, the dive bar that may not specialize in a 5-step cocktail, but come in, you're going to get eye contact, you're going to get a nice clean serve, and we're going to go from there. So I think it's celebrating hospitality from my end that I hang my hat on in terms of this ambassador role, for sure.
Do you think the bartenders don't have don't realize the importance that they have?
How many bartenders are in the room?
Wow.
Okay, so I'm not going to answer that bad.
I mean, are you guys aware of the impact you have on people? I understand it seems very hard when you work 5 to 6 nights a week, and at some point it all feels the same, but sometimes we don't realize that what seems just like a regular shift for us might be one of the most precious and special moments in people's life. They meet for the first time, they get married, and it might just be another guest for you, but the role we play in society on a daily basis is magic. And this is certainly something that we should be proud of as a whole, as a industry, as a community.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I come from a really different background as well. I was trained as a physiotherapist, worked at it, wasn't really happy in my job. And for me, the reason to get into bartending and cocktails actually, first of all, was just a really interest in learning how to make a good cocktail. It was just for me personally actually, or on parties. But when I learned and I thought, oh, this is a whole world around it, and this is really interesting, really professional. You can actually go places with this in this industry. I had no idea. I came from such a different background. So when I started working behind a bar, I quit my job as a physiotherapist. I started working behind the bar, and I was so focused on my drinks and to make it better and read all these books and go to seminars and really focusing on the drink. It was only later that I started to realize the hospitality part is so much more important, to make people feel welcome in your bar and make them leave with a better feeling than when they come in. It's so much more important. And for me, at the beginning, I was so focused on my drinks, and it was just later on I was like, oh no, this is not what it's all about. It's about people and hospitality. And
sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. So you quit your physiotherapist, and you had a happy ending. Okay.
Yeah, I did. That's a good one.
With a new job, right? Yeah. You can
Real quick, to echo that point, me and Freddy were talking previously about, okay, you're a 5-shift a week bartender, you're doing your thing, but do you have what is the 5-year plan? What is the growth potential for you? Where do you plan to go, after you've mastered your cocktail? So as the brand ambassador world, do you have do you have a goal set out for yourself? You know what I mean? We were speaking about old school bartendership came from, you started in the kitchen. You started as the bar back. You know, now with the power of bartending schools and academies and things of that nature, you're able to get a shift. I'm sorry I mentioned it, but you're able to get a shift. But what is the legacy you want to leave besides making a good cocktail? And what is your future plan? Do you want to go into a further element of food and bev? Do you want to come on this prime drink side of things? You know, do you want to become brand ambassadors? And I think that's the responsibility that I keep going back to, is because now we're seeing bartenders who not only work 2 shifts a week and then they're flying around the world. And I'm like, well, what's happening at your bar?
To be clear, that's specifically in America, where you get paid a lot of money to pour some drinks.
To pour some drinks, for sure.
I think that's a major difference is how the industry is paid around the world as well. So one of the things that I think we can do is we have power as a group, and in this industry we're really terrible at getting people together into to have a group voice, and at the moment I think that this is a industry and a profession which is underpaid basically for what everyone does. And I know part of that is because all the businesses need to turn a profit, but we also live in our own silos of our own bars. We don't connect well enough with each other as an actual industry to have a united voice when it comes to improving what we do and improving our work environments and the hours that are worked, and also the pay that everyone gets in the hospitality industry. It's one of the largest industries in the world with some of the least representation when it comes to changing politics and practices. And I mean, how many of you guys here today as bartenders plan on being bartenders in 20 years' time?
Yeah, awesome.
Good man, right?
Yeah,
okay.
He knows exactly.
How many want to own the bar?
Okay. So yeah, we sometimes talk about bartending as a career, but I think that is a little bit of a mistruth there, because you know, if you can be like an electrician or a plumber as a career and you can retire on that kind of trade job. But with bartending, most of you here, I'm sure, have a greater aspiration 5-10 years' time, if you're not already an owner or an operator, having your own venue or working for a larger hospitality group or working on the drink side of the business or doing something else beyond bartending. So it's possible to have a career, I think, with some people like in the US who say, yeah, if you become really famous, if you have Instagram with like 10 million followers. I don't know how many followers is a big number now.
Exactly. And we were speaking about earlier, it's about the market, the city that you are in. Is bartending a respectable career? Because I think that pushes the envelope on how much you want to learn, how much you want to get into your craft, because you might be in a small market where your parents are like, you're not going to be a bartender, you're going to go off and do something else. That might influence how hard you study, how hard you want to work about your craft, and I think that it affects the entire market that you're in, for sure.
Because you have always have to be updates,
yes,
and you have to do formation constantly, yes, right? So
yeah, I mean, question to all is bartending a respected career move here? In I see a couple, yeah,
more or less. Yeah. Mais ou menos, like you said. I think it's working, right? And it's changing, and it also depends on how the bartenders dedicate themselves, of course, to what they do, and if they do enough formation. I think everything matters on the respect that you gain from the community you work with. But it's a small market, it's Portugal, so you're never going to get 1 billion followers on Instagram just because you're good at doing cocktails, because we're really, really small. But how do you think that the consumers will, or what's the bartender's role to make the consumers to risk new things when they enter a bar? It's just a matter of confidence. It depends on the confidence that the bartender reflects.
Yes, that is part of it, I think. It's also listening to your guest. It's not just like, hey, I've got this really cool bottle, you have to try this. No, actually listening, see what they're drinking, what is their comfort zone, and try not to kick them out of it, but just give them a little nudge, maybe. But yeah, listening. I think I've had happen as well that I was sitting at a bar, I just knew what I wanted to drink, and the bartender gives me this massive spiel about the numbers of ingredients and whatever, and I'm like, okay, I just wanted to drink. I know what I want. So you need to gauge, need to gauge your guests and see what they're ready for, and give them a little nudge and give them some options, and but not full on overload
over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know those kind of people who come into our bars and they ask for an old-fashioned because they've seen it on Mad Men, or a martini because they've seen it on James Bond. That's because people trust TV and movies, you know. So, do you guys trust that we know what we're talking about right now?
Great answer.
Make your guests trust you. Make your guests trust what you do and trust what you say. And if they trust you, if you establish a relationship of trust, and they will take you seriously, they will follow your lead. And if you make a suggestion, if you recommend something that might be strange, might be odd, new spirits, new flavors, something they've never tried before, if there is really a pure and honest relationship of trust between your guests and you, that could, take you, the sky is the limit, literally, and it doesn't really matter how big or small the country is, because by the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what happens in your bar. Whatever happens on social media, whatever happens in bar shows, and whatever happens at guest shifts in other countries, by the end of the day, the people who come to your bar, your guests, they don't know about brands, they don't know about guest shifts and bar shows.
And sometimes they don't care.
They don't care. They want to have a good time, and with a bit of love and a bit of trust, they would have the best time ever. So, go for it.
I would love to add something to this point of view that is brilliant for me. I mean, thank you. No, it's really brilliant because
It's Coco.
The reality is that usually bartenders, they tend to think with bartenders' mind, and they think that everybody in front of them is an expert, that they will, of course, love to know how you do agar-agar and whatever you do in your bar, which they don't sometimes, because maybe sometimes you have somebody that is not from our industry visiting your bar. And I would like to go back to the point. Sometimes we overthink. We need to create too much complications when it's not needed. I don't know if somebody in this room love to go to Duke's Bar in London, which is a place that I love, where my grande collega Alessandro Palazzi works. If you go to Duke's Bar, you will understand what is hospitality 101. Because this place, if you see how they make the martini, you will understand to be a super, super good bartender, you don't need this level of complexity. They just pour the vermouth in the cup, in the glass. This is what they do. Then he throw the vermouth on the moquette, and it's just pouring straight spirit of choice, ice cold. It's not even doing the dilution. I mean, everybody can do this. He's not a bartender. I assume this kind of serve, everybody can do it. But why people go there? Why this bar is always full? It's because of the man. It's because of the storytelling.
It's the atmosphere.
Then they do one thing really well, right? They're known for one.
Yes.
They're known for one thing. They specialize in one story.
And it's an iconic bar for martini. And martini drinkers, they. Well, this is a long story.
But one thing, I don't think that anyone could do it. I mean, of course, making cocktails, serving drinks is not rocket science. But the dedication to hospitality is something that not everyone could do. There's a very special kind of person that dedicates his or her life to, sounds weird, but serving others, takes pride and appreciates the fact that, we take a step back while everyone else is having fun, enjoying themselves. Tough hours, long nights, everyone else is having a laugh, and we're working. You need, I don't want to say a certain talent, but a certain passion and dedication to do it. So yeah, if you combine that with the right amount of hospitality, the right amount of curiosity, you can become the best at what you do.
I think there's also a certain element of humility as well, and I think that's what we're seeing between the classic cocktail and that surge, and that we got real serious, real old school, real classic, and that's why the 90s fun, Sex on the Beach, Long Island iced teas, things of that nature. People were just wanting to have fun and take themselves less serious. I don't think it was more of like, hey, I'm looking to have this cocktail. It's just, I'm looking to have fun and open it up to something, a nostalgia element that people, had, for sure. So bartenders are stepping back and allowing themselves to have more fun, for sure.
Which is great.
Do you think the technical skills for the bartenders are more developed than ever nowadays?
There's Michelin-starred style chefs, in markets that are pushing that, but then there's also mom and pop markets where, again, the humility. I don't mind going into a bar and a gentleman looks me straight in his eyes and says, hey man, I just started here last week, talk me through what you want. Not a problem, because you let me know off top, rather than your head down and you're sweating and you're concerned about, your homemade falernum, and hopefully that's going to be nice in this cocktail. There's a humility that I think needs to be had.
So it all
sure.
comes down to the truth. Yeah?
Yes.
Well, I think that there's mentally it's more advanced now, but technically, I think there are probably quite a few of us that think, hey, actually back in the day, when you were in a really busy bar and we didn't make, great cocktails, but we would.
Because you don't have a lot of time to.
Technically, everybody got a drink in a few minutes. Yeah. So, that was pretty good, right? You used to be able to make a lot of drinks really quickly. So technically, I think that there are people, what I'm saying is that I think there are shortcuts that are taken these days, because mentally there is so much more that goes into drinks and menus and serving people now, and we have so many more products to use than back in the day when you had 2 gins available on your bar. It was a lot easier to do that back then, so you concentrated on the technical part a bit more back then, I think. No, you could totally disagree.
We are approaching the end. After we're going to have a period of questions from the audience. Now that you talked about the change of ingredients, we have to talk about sustainability for a little while. Do you think that plays an important role? Is there anything changing in the industry?
I will take the first shot because this is something interesting for me. I have to be very honest with you, and this is something that I can include in the trends. We need to do something. We all need to do something, no matter if we are bartenders or not. I remember my father used to tell me, leave the word to your kids as you were expecting to receive it from me. This is so important. It's not just a trend. Forget about putting a pasta straw in your cocktail because you want to be fancy. We really need to do something for this issue, and this is so sad. And I don't have any kids, okay? I'm probably not gonna have, and I'm not gonna leave this word to anyone. So, and I'm really obsessed with everything. It's not putting the straw made of pasta and then going in the street and throw cigarettes on the ground or plastic in the sea. You have to adapt it like a lifestyle that you can bring it in the bar.
I think what's really important is, and I know a lot of people, a lot of industries, businesses use sustainability as a way to market their business, to seem greener, more sustainable. And I believe that if we really want to make a difference as an industry, address it together as a whole, we need to do it not for the sake of promoting our business, but for the sake of being sustainable and, making the world a better place.
Well, being sustainable also means you're able to make a profit still while doing it. That helps, right? But it feels like I just talk about money all the time. But yeah, it's a business. If sustainability turns a profit or is beneficial or is something that can help market the business, then it's a win for everybody. And so I think in that way, there are things that you can do to take action now, individually. So are these things, when you look at them, will you take action on them, or will you be the sort of company or person who only does it because everybody else has started doing it and now you're forced to be put in that position? When, say, for example, Starbucks transition eventually with McDonald's, they've got a partnership right now. Eventually, they're going to transition into using fully recyclable cups for all of their coffees and soft drinks and sodas. So then when another large outlet has to do the same. But are they doing it because they want to? No, they're doing it because they have to, because their competition did it. So
because the consumer maybe is going to pick
because the consumer will expect
worried brand, of course.
So of course it's a good thing when other companies and people take this action because they have to, but are things that we can do right now, action that we can take, which is also profitable and sustainable for the business as well as the environment?
I think it could be a bit dangerous even to call it a trend. I think it's important that we're more aware and we're more taking practical steps in your bar, what you can do to make a difference. But I think it's really dangerous when brands start to see it as sort of a gimmick and like a sales pitch. Oh yeah, we are really sustainable, but not really acting on it in real life. Exactly. It should not be a gimmick. It shouldn't be a trend. But it's really important that we talk about it.
But it can start in the bars, like
yes, exactly.
Not to use the plastic straws or reusable plastic. They can use plastic cups, but reusable or glass, of course.
For me, the term of sustainability, we have a responsibility in the bar. The bar is where a lot of political step changes happened over years and over times. And I think I look at it from sustainability of humanity and ethics. You know, it's not just about the drink. It's about sustainability of, are you friendly and open-minded to all types of employees working at your venue? You know what I mean? Is there a diversity element that you look into in your bar, in your establishment? Is there ethics that you look at sustaining female, working in your bars, minorities working in your bars, sustaining an element of ethics and humanity that I think the bar needs to take back responsibility for, because a lot of political situations and ethics came from that. And I think for me, I always hashtag beyond the booze, because it is beyond the booze sometimes. We're coming in looking for a humane element of this, and I think that's the sustainability that I'm excited about, for sure.
It's a good trend, actually. More females behind the bar.
Yeah, I like that. Well, do we have the questions? Preciso da vossa ajuda para conseguir acelerar as perguntas que foram feitas através do site. Elas vão aparecer ali? Yeah?
Was it a question?
No. I was just asking for help to see. Are they going to appear there? Yeah. So we have questions from the audience. Most uncommon request at a bar, and how did you handle it? Maybe you can answer that.
Most common request.
Yeah. Uncommon.
Uncommon. There was a lady who asked me for a virgin martini.
Virgin martini?
A non-alcoholic martini cocktail. I got her a beautiful martini coupette, a martini glass with some still water and a cucumber in it. She was happy.
Thank you, Vivaldo, for the question. You want to answer?
Honestly, where can I get some drugs? And you're like, bro, I'm at a bar. I'm just going to be straightforward, right? That's what, they come in there thinking, the bars where you can get everything.
I got proposed for a threesome one time.
For a what?
Threesome?
The Italian, of course.
What? Are you serious? A guy and a girl. I mean, husband and wife. He was like, come with us. I was like, yes, I'll call you when I'm done. Okay, yeah. Don't worry. You go first.
Are you sure you have no kids?
This is not a topic to touch now.
Another question. As you probably all travel a lot, what country do you think is leading the trends on mixology? It's an anonymous question.
That's anonymous. For me, still, because I want to see things changing, but still is not. I wouldn't even say UK. I would say London. Still.
Everybody agrees?
Yeah. Right. No, I don't think so. Do you? I think that when we talk about cocktails, I think it's split in 3 areas now. We have, in Asia, we have some amazing cities with great cocktails. In America, we have still more classic cocktails. And in London, you get a plastic Lego elephant with your drink and like a cocktail that tastes okay. I think you've got different styles in different areas. This is really, oh no, this is on camera. I have to go back to London and have a cocktail out of a plastic elephant. God.
You know what, Freddy? When it comes to London, I mean, I do believe that it's the most trend-setting cocktail city in the world. However, just to make sure, they use the same liquor as we all do. They have the same skills. The major difference between London and many other cities is that their guests have decades more experience drinking cocktails. So it's not us. It's the people who go to the bars. Absolutely.
Are more open to try
Yeah,
new
so if you give it a bit of time, it's going to be the same.
You bring up a good point. I just had a great cocktail experience in Dubai, where laws are different, but they are still crafting great cocktails, and the desire and the learn is there. So I'm getting.
So it's not the best bartenders or the best drinks or the best bars. It's just the acceptance of mixology or bars that is, well, higher, whatever, in London than in the rest of Europe. Not the quality.
If every day some people enter the bars and ask you for different things, you're going to be more creative and you're going to do a lot of different things also.
We have great theme bars.
Theme bars.
And what I mean is, when you think of the word theme, you normally think of like a jungle cafe or Disneyland or something like that. But theme bars are like, speakeasies are a theme bar, right? Speakeasies have no necessity these days. The Duke's Bar in London is a theme bar. Everyone has nice three-piece suits and it's glorious surroundings, but you have your cocktail poured straight from the bottle into your martini glass. It's a theme environment. Dandelion in London is more, it's the drinks, when you look at their menu, it's modern tiki. The way that they comprise the ingredients in their cocktails, they do a lot of work back of house, a lot of batching of ingredients. A lot of batching of ingredients happens in tiki bars a lot. It's tiki, the style of the drink, but it's presented in a very modern way.
Yes. Well, probably the last question, because we're gonna have to change to the whiskeys, of course. In your opinion, the question is from João. What a new spirit trend? Probably vermouth or liquors. Low LBV is a new trend?
Well, I'll have to say liqueurs, of course, and low ABV, yes. Total trend.
Yeah?
Yes. I have to, yes. That's the new thing. No, but I think also people are more aware what they're drinking on a night out. If you don't want to get drunk on speakeasy style spirit-forward cocktails, low ABVs is a good way to have a longer night, try different things, have a night of refreshing and easy. Lower on alcohol, a little bit more conscious. I will never say it's healthier, but it's a little bit more conscious about what you drink. And it's easier. You can try different things on a longer, spread out night.
She's selling well.
Two points to echo that. I love that it's low AB is a trend, because being a Navy strength and high proof, I love that because I know it's only going to be cyclical and come back our way. One point. Secondly is what I think is a shift change are the artisanal, botanical, non-alcoholic mixers that are playing a heavy part in the craft cocktail world right now. There's some amazing activations in beverages, beverages that you're able to mix with, whether they're tonics or things of that nature, that are specifically made for spirits. And I appreciate that, because we try not to drink every night, so if I could, my low ABV is Sailor Jerry and soda water.
Are you worried that non-alcoholic cocktails become a trend?
Worried?
They're
great. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be serving a non-alcoholic cocktail. They're fantastic.
No, but I think his question was from a brand point of view.
Yeah, of course. You're not going to sell this.
It's allowing us to explore innovations within our realm that we may have never gone back before. It's allowing us to explore innovations, whether it's CBD oils or THC or things of that nature. I mean, it's a beautiful time to be able to think about innovations, and this is allowing that for sure.
So you all answered. You want to add anything else on this?
Just one last thing is that if you do this boring thing that sometimes we have to do, like looking at figures or statistics, one trend is growing is the premium category of spirits. Whatever spirits you look at, consumers, they're starting to pick good stuff, to pick quality products, which is fantastic for me, because when I was young, I have to be honest with you, when we had some hair, I was going to bars and just taking the cheapest booze ever just to get drunk. So now even the young guys, they go in a bar and they call some specific brand that they like based on quality.
Rather than price.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
sometimes price quality.
Another question came up. Your best cocktail experience, where and why?
For me, it was recently in Miami,
Miami.
At Sweet Liberty, God rest his soul, John LeMaire. There's I don't even want to say a VIP table, but there's a table behind the bar where you can sit with a group of 6 or 7 and enjoy the cocktail experience from behind the bar.
That's extra VIP.
But it was, so we're talking humility at its finest. I mean, you got the bar backs running by you, you see the liqueurs that they're pouring, you see, and they're engaging with you. And
So there it is, the experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that I would say mine.
It's more than just a drink.
Yeah, it was a shift table. Yeah, it's like you would get a nice chef table for sure.
I had the best experience of cocktail in my life in Brazil, in Jericoacoara. It's a village of fishermen, and it's like there is no electricity, no roads, nothing. I was on this. It's like a desert, the area, and we were in a small lake, and we met this. Well, to call it a bar, it's something that is even too much. And, it was probably the dirtiest bar I ever seen in my life. The bartender was shaking cocktails in a glass jar, as a shaker. Drives, and I will close from my point of view the speech with you. This drives me back to the beginning. Sometimes it's not, the environment, it's just the experience you're living. And trust me when I say that was the best caipirinha I ever had in my life. And still, when I have a caipirinha, the connection I create in my big brain, because I have a big head, is taking me there to Jericoacoara.
Wow.
Which, of course, was not a famous bar. This you have to see it. It was not a famous bar or fancy.
I got to say, I don't think I've ever had. I've had one because I don't think that I've ever had a good cocktail experience in a bar which is famous for that cocktail, except one time. So, without mentioning places like, Raffles Hotel, for example, or, or the Sazerac Bar in New Orleans, or anything like that, the places that are really famous for the cocktails that end up being a complete letdown. The one place that I went to that is well known for their cocktail that was genuinely an awesome drink was penicillin at Attaboy in New York, because that drink, they've nailed it. It's delicious, it's modern, and it's super simple, but the flavors are incredible.
You should give us a guide, write a guide, the 5 of you.
Okay, I think my best cocktail experience, not even the cocktail experience, but just generally the attention to detail, was in Tel Aviv, a bar called Bellboy, I think. And just the way they took care of us, it was really cool. But the best bit actually was the toilet, which sounds weird, but there was an experience on its own. It was really
the toilet.
Well, yeah, no, not what you think, but like, but you come in and it's really dark. There's this crazy interior in that toilet. It's really loud. Classical music, and you come in like all of a sudden you're transported in another world, and you think it's a mirror, and then all of a sudden this other guy walks past you, and you're like, whoa, I'm in a unisex. So this is all really, really weird. But for that toilet, I really remember. I remember this part. Just a general attention to detail. It was amazing.
Coco, have you been in that toilet? No.
Well, no. I'm not a connoisseur, I have to say. Until very recently, just like 5-6 years ago, I actually did not enjoy gin, which is rather odd because I'm here to represent Hendrick's gin. And I used to work in a bar in London, in North London, and after work, all the bartenders made themselves a Gibson cocktail, which is a martini variation with onions rather than twist or a cucumber slice. And I didn't like gin, so I asked for a Manhattan instead. And I said, sorry, Coco, it's Gibson or tap water. Okay. So I asked for a beer, and I said, Coco, it's Gibson or tap water. And even a Coke, they refused to serve. It was Gibson or tap water. So for about 4 weeks, I was drinking tap water. And I was, And after work, everyone was having fun and partying, and I was just sitting there and nipping my tap water. And then eventually I tried, and it wasn't very pleasant, but one night, and I can't recall what happened, but it was the perfect combination of the right music, the right people, the right lighting, and everything just seemed perfect, and all of a sudden I tasted a drink that I had before, never enjoyed, and all of a sudden it tasted like the best drink I've ever had in my life. So yes, it is absolutely about the quality of the products you use, the way you prepare a drink, but also so incredibly important and crucial, the environment you're in. Because when you wake up the next morning, the first thing that you remember will certainly not be the drink. It will be the people you're with, the music, the conversations you have, but the drink has to be on point, because if the drink is perfect, you can focus on everything else around it. And if the drink's not, then everything else just goes downhill.
I love that when you were saying that, the power of Hendrick's in that story there is that you were talking about a martini you were talking about a Gibson martini with pearl onions in as a variation on a martini instead of cucumber, as if cucumber is not a variation on a martini garnish.
Well, that's another discussion for another time.
We'll do it later.
We have to wrap it up. I'm just going to ask you for a big round of applause for them. What an incredible panel. Coco, Simone, Freddy, Gravy, and Malika, thank you very much. Now I ask you to leave, yeah? Thank you. And take the whiskey. Seats. Don't leave, but don't leave the room. You can stay there and listen to the other guys. We're not going to take a break. It's going to be, I'm going to call you just now because you are all standing up. So, now we're going to talk about whiskeys. It's our second panel. So we have Mitch Bechard from Glenfiddich. Is it the way to say it? Dyer from Grants, Petch from Monkey Shoulder, Hendrick from Naked Grouse, and Quinn from Tullamore. Welcome, gentlemen. So, hello. You learned a lot about mixology? You liked the talk about it?
Yeah, I just learned loads, so I'm quite happy.
So now we're going to talk about whiskey. We also have a previous discussion about the topics we're going to talk here about. We're going to start about the consumers. What are the whiskey main consumers? Who's going to start?
Everybody.
Everybody should drink whiskey.
Everybody
From
should
6
at least
years old
try it.
to 80. No.
So basically, I used to do a lot of training sessions before Monkey Shoulder, across the brands in our portfolio. And every now and then you'd get one person that would say, you know what, I don't really like whiskey. And my reaction all the time would be, wow, you've tried them all? Jesus, you've done better than most of us, because you've got to think of it as a wide plethora of different styles of whiskey. And I didn't used to think I liked whiskey, but that was only because my dad drank rubbish stuff, and what I was stealing out of his booze cabinet just wasn't very good. So that's why I didn't have a very good relationship with whiskey to begin with. But as you learn and try new things and try drinking it in different ways, you kind of experience, you work out which styles you like, and then you can investigate that area more. That's why it's so exciting. I think.
At what age did you start to drink?
I'm not going to disclose that information.
Can I just say something here? See, whiskies. Is there? No. So it was up there. It said WHISKIES. That is the plural for Scotch whiskey. The plural for Irish whiskey is WHISKEYS. Okay, so when we put up whiskies, we really mean the other ones as well. Okay.
Yeah, you want
enough. No, I'm not paranoid. I know you're out to get me. Okay.
He wants to start that discussion about Irish and Scottish whiskey.
No,
no. He paid me to put that question on the table.
No, I would not do that. I'm not going to. That would not be fair to the Scotch whiskey people. So, no, but so obviously I'm very old. You can see I'm very old. And when I started in the business in the 70s, the early 70s, hate it. But when I started then, the only people who drank whiskey were people of my father's age. They were old and they were male, okay? And over time, obviously, things have changed. And I'm shocked now that my sons drink whiskey in their 20s and love talking about it. But I'm also, I can tell you, in Central Europe, a place I've spent a lot of time, The research is telling us that 50-50 male-female drinking whiskey. That's really shocking to me, that there are as many women in Central Europe drinking whiskey as there are men. It's fantastic.
That means we are becoming more beautiful because they are drinking more.
It certainly improves the women, there's no doubt about it. But it's an interesting development that younger people and females are drinking whiskey in a way that 30, 40 years ago they definitely were not. And I think that's one of the reasons when people say, why is whiskey, especially Irish whiskey, I'm sorry, doing so well at the moment, why is it so interesting to people, is because there's a broader base of consumers. Yes, bartenders have a big role to play in that, but there's a broader interest in, and I think it's fair to say that people perceive whiskey as a craft spirit. And they're right, okay? I mean, with respect to all of the other spirits that you don't bother to put into dark aromatic warehouses and mature for years, that's fine. But for whiskies, it's seen as a craft, and one of the reasons is for that.
What do you think made that change, that people start drinking at a younger age and women drink more? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think you say 30, 40 years ago, I came into whiskey from a slightly different angle, so I'm not a traditional bartender, brand ambassador. I actually made men's swim shorts before, but whiskey was kind of a passion, and I was a kind of late bloomer into that. But I think because I didn't come through the typical route into brand ambassador work through bartending, I came through that consumer path. And when I first started drinking whiskey, which was 10 years ago or so, my family, my granddad drank blended Scotch. He was a massive raving alcoholic. All of the literature that I read was pointing me towards single malt Scotch whiskies. It all seemed quite pretentious to me. But as soon as I started to meet bartenders and I started to get into whiskey, you saw that there were blended malts out there. There were really cool new Scotch whiskey brands popping up that were talking to a completely different audience. So I would say that kind of inspired me to get into whiskey, to get out there, to try and tell that story, to encourage more people to have fun with whiskey and don't necessarily stick to all the old literature out there that tells you you have to drink it a certain way, it has to be aged, it has to come from this distillery. So, yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've definitely moved away, thankfully, from whiskey being an old man's drink. When I started talking about whiskey, which was 15 years ago, to consumers, it was in golf clubs in Scotland, and it was definitely this kind of wrinkly sausage fest that I was chatting to. That was my audience. Glad to see that has definitely changed now. And not just consumer-wise, but within the industry of Scotch whiskey as well. You look at how many females are talking about Scotch whiskey and making Scotch whiskey as well. I mean, you got Rachel Barry out there for Bowmore, our current apprentice to David Stewart, who's been looking after Balvenie for the last 50 years, is female. Kelsey, who is 26, 27, I think she is. So it's amazing to see not just the audience getting younger, but this whole female aspect of it coming in, which it should be. I mean, when you look at the way females are, they have a bigger olfactory gland than us guys, which means they can smell more. It makes sense they're making it and drinking it. They're going to get more from us guys.
Are they changing whiskey?
Are they changing whiskey? I think when we're talking about Scotch whiskey, that's a very hard thing to do, right? We have a lot of traditions, we have a lot of set ways in which we have to make whiskey. So I definitely think having those fresh eyes come in, you're going to see that change, and that's something that we're doing with Scotch whiskey is that innovation aspect of it, as with Ireland.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about that innovation, what can still be done new regarding whiskey. I didn't know there are a set of rules that make it impossible to do anything we want. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so there's a governing body for whiskey called the Scotch Whisky Association. It's basically the guidelines for Scotch whiskey, so it doesn't all become rubbish, to maintain a quality, yeah. But the problem with those guidelines is there's only so much you can change. You can't go too far one way or the other. But when it comes to innovations, not only is there still a lot happening, there are many new distilleries opening up, playing around with different woods or different yeasts or different maturation times. There's so many elements within whiskey that can change, and it hugely changes the flavour of whiskey. If you take Speyside, 5 miles in any direction in the northeast of Scotland, you will hit a distillery. But all of those whiskies taste incredibly different.
We were talking about when in the previous panel about mixology and in the bartender's role, like giving advice to the consumers to try new things. Do you think that the bartenders, I don't know if you guys are aware of all these different flavors, when some person goes to a bar and asks, I want to try a new whiskey, what can you recommend? Do you think they are aware and conscious of all these different kinds of flavors in whiskey?
I think bartenders are probably the most trained people on this subject, outside of people that make it themselves. Yeah, I mean, as a bartender, every time we had a new product in, we would sit around, we would try it, we would discuss it, we understood it, we knew what the information to put over to the guest outside of just what's on the back of the label. I mean, even reading the back of the label can be useful to us all. I hope you'll do that and make a habit of doing that. But I think the most important whiskey innovators in the entire alcohol industry are the bartenders, because they're the people that can modify outside of the realms of the Scotch Whisky Association. We're having drinks now that I would have never have assumed to have when I started bartending a few years ago. Obviously, that before it was classics, and even though the top three of the top 5 most drunk drinks currently are whiskey drinks. They are classics, but outside of that, there's a whole world of drinks that I would have never even imagined bartenders would put whiskey with. So it's definitely one of the most versatile spirits.
And I think one of the big changes for me, again, going back 100 years ago when I started, bartenders were people who gave you what you asked for. Okay, they didn't have any recommendations to make to you. You just had your beer, your Super Bock, your Sagres. I know those two, okay. But Sauvignon, também, okay. But they gave you what you asked for. Nowadays, the bartenders have lots to recommend. But the reason they have is because bartenders ask a lot of questions. They want to know what is in that bottle that's different from that bottle there. And that's why, as ambassadors, we spend a lot of our time educating. And we have a bartender community everywhere who are asking questions and want to know more. And partly it's because they want to create drinks within which they can use their expertise on fusions or garnishes or whatever to complement the whiskey or whatever spirit. But it's also because they just want to know what is it that's different about this whiskey or that whiskey. So if somebody asks, what about a whiskey, they can explain. So I think if I'm anything, I find myself being an educator. Yeah.
I think, going back to when I bartended, again, kind of like Freddie May's day, Freddy and I used to bartend together. And,
oh yeah,
it was, Cosmopolitans. And actually, I bartended in Portugal. I worked here for 6 months back in the day.
Where?
I think it was late 90s in Villamoura. But it was like pina coladas every day. It was fantastic. Loved it. But for me, when I think back on my bartending days, the whiskey category was quite intimidating. There wasn't that much information out there. We didn't have phones. We didn't have internet. I think the wheel was just invented, right? That was about where we're at. But and it was an intimidating category, and it wasn't as open as it is today. I think we're a lot more free with information from distilleries, from companies. We've got a lot more transparency than we ever have had in the past, and there's no bullshit anymore. Back in the day, we used to talk about how this whiskey is absolutely fantastic because it's blessed by magical fairies, and the water source is absolutely unbelievable, and there was just a load of crap behind it. And now it's a lot more open, which is great to see, and I think that's the role of all of us for helping you guys, at least, is going into your bar and giving you that information and giving you the tools to not make it as intimidating.
So that's what you do when you go around the world. One of the things you do, you go into bars and give this kind of advice to bartenders?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think we, as brand ambassadors for Scotch whisky brands, and Irish, of course, we have a massive job to do to encourage bartenders to have fun with whiskey, because you've been taught for years and years and years that you can only drink whiskey neat, and you're told certain things, and eventually they sink and you sink in and you believe in that. So I guess it would be, we were posing the question earlier, I guess it'd be interesting to know from the audience, do you still have people coming in and frowning at the idea of mixing up a Scotch whiskey cocktail, or generally speaking, are people quite open to the idea? Thumbs up for open, thumbs down for...
Yeah, mixing. Mixing, yes or no? Mixing?
Yeah, which is
and not mixing.
So still mixed.
Yeah.
So one day it'd be great to come here and everyone put their hands up and say Scotch whiskey tastes amazing in cocktails, and it's also a great spirit to enjoy neat.
And if I were you, I would mix my Scotch whiskey.
So the Irish want to mix.
First low blow of the talk. I think we'll get a payback towards the end.
You wouldn't mix your whiskey with...
Yeah, but no, you still go to parts of the world, especially when you go out to Asia, where you go into bars and you won't see a whiskey cocktail on the menu, and they all drink it neat, and it's on the table, and it's just a different way of enjoying the spirit, which is fine. But I think it's our job to go out there and say there are other ways to enjoy whiskey, have it neat, enjoy it in a cocktail.
So what would you just say that? What are the new things that you talk when you talk to the bartenders? What are the new things you can give them? New innovations that are coming from whiskey. What's happening in the whiskey industry now?
So probably Joe's better equipped to answer that question. But when I travel, I kind of hit 2 points. The first point is talking about grants and how it's made. And usually you go into this is how it's made and blah, blah, blah. That's great. You need to know that information. But what I really enjoy telling is the story behind the whiskey. Because if you get someone coming up to your bar and saying, I want this whiskey, and you tell them everything that's in it, that's the knowledge. But they will leave with an interesting, funny, or quirky story. That's when you'll meet characters and have a good laugh. It's good to know the knowledge and the background behind it, but having those quirky stories, that's what we share when we drink, right? Having this crazy cocktail that you never thought of making because you met someone else there. Now, when it comes to mixing it, whiskey is so diverse in flavour. You can mix it with so many different things. But again, Joe is your main man when it comes to mixing a lot of different things you can mix with it.
Well, because Monkey Shoulder, until recently, we only had obviously one type of whiskey, and that was Monkey Shoulder Original. We've recently launched the Smoky Monkey just to kind of as a reaction to more than half of the top trending whiskies in the world for the last 5 years being Islay style smoky whiskies. So that's obviously something that's become more and more approachable and mixable in bars. So instead of spending like 50, 60 pounds on an Islay, you can buy smoky for a lot less, and which makes it more mixable again, because you don't have to pass the cost over to the customer. So it's all down to like cost and things, which, you know, I'm not gonna judge someone if they want to mix like a 20, 30-year-old whiskey. I'll probably think I wouldn't do that, but if they've got the money and it's their whiskey, they can do whatever they want with it, right? It's theirs to do whatever.
Very interesting point that Danny made, and if you like, I can translate everything he says for you. There's no problem.
That coming from an Irishman.
We might get stuck in between you two.
No.
We are filming it so that we can put subtitles when he's...
Okay, no problem. No, but what Danny's point about the whiskey and the making of the whiskey is, and how it's made, is very important, but the stories are very interesting. And sometimes, and frequently I would say, the stories and how the whiskey is made, they come together. Because there is a story behind why the whiskey is made in one thing. So I'll tell you a story. There's a man in Ireland back in the late 1800s. His name is Daniel Edmund Williams, and that's the D-E-W on Tullamore Jew. Okay, he's famous because he brought electricity to his town. He's famous because he brought the first telephone to his town, but he's more famous because of his whiskey. And one of the things he did was he first introduced grain whiskey into Ireland, so he made Ireland's first blended whiskey. So when I tell the story of Daniel Williams, I can tell the story of how our whiskey is made. So they're both interlinked. It's not about necessarily whiskey is one thing and stories are something else. Actually, there's a richness in the history of the whiskey around the man or the town where it comes from, or the place, the water source, whatever. There's always stories that are like history of the place or the person that link into the whiskey itself. Fair enough?
So these three also, then the storytelling plays a really important role on selling whiskey.
Well, I think it's because it helps people remember why that whiskey is different, because there was somebody behind it and there was a story behind it. I think that's helpful in remembering.
That's a story. There's a story behind every brand of whiskey. Some are real, maybe some other are invented. You should know better than me, of course. But what makes people choose one whiskey instead of the other? The better story?
I'm not going to answer that.
Because it's hard to choose a whiskey.
Do you know who makes the decision?
The consumers?
No, the bartenders.
The bartenders?
You got to the bar, that's your port of call. That's your main person behind the bar. They're the educator. They have the knowledge. So you choose. And when you sit down with someone and give them a great story, they might fall in love with that brand. But then you go, but you prefer sherry flavour or bourbon flavour, so let me put you onto this one. And then someone else comes in, and that person sitting there will do your job. They'll start talking to them, and that's the beauty of whiskey. As soon as you get into it, and as soon as you have that first few stories, you meet other people and other bartenders, because we're a big family, and you learn so much from one another. So I'd really believe it is the bartender who makes that choice by being attentive, by listening to what they want and figuring it out from there.
Yeah, and being ambassadors as well, we don't really let facts get in the way of a good story. That's kind of what we do as a job. But, you know, I think talking about that as well, talking about how, one of the things I love is going back about 8 years when I first started with William Grant & Sons, you know, we're still a family-run company. I was lucky enough to run into Charlie Grant Gordon, who was one of the legends within the whiskey industry, and at the time he was looking after, he was the head of William Grant & Sons. And we just released a new Glenfiddich called Snow Phoenix, and it had a great backstory behind it. Basically, our warehouses collapsed, and we pulled the casks from these collapsed warehouses. So I started to talk to Charlie about it. It's like, what do you think about this? And he's like, you know, Mitch, the story's great, but the story's all bullshit unless we get the liquid right in the bottle. Which is something that really resonated with me and stuck with me for a long time. And you know, it's funny because we do a lot of talking about Scottish and Irish whiskey as well. I think you guys probably know this. Going back to production, in Scotland we double distill our Scotch whiskey. You know, the Irish, they need 3 times to get it right because they triple distill. You guys heard that before?
In Scotland, they're too mean to do it the 3rd time. They're saving money.
Well, you guys you've heard the story, right? The difference between a Scotsman and a coconut. Eventually, you're going to get a drink out of a coconut.
I think you could go on and on and on with this.
This has gone on for days before.
For days, yeah, you get used to that. So it's not only the story, the product has to be good, because you can only fool the consumer one time, of course.
Yeah.
After he tries it, and if it's not good, he's not going to do it again, he's not going to drink it again.
Yeah, I think most of us come from Scotland here, so, well, 3 of us do. We're very fortunate because we live in Scotland, so we're able to live and breathe those stories, and it's, you know, a couple of hours in a car and you're at a distillery, whereas I guess for a lot of you guys, you're making your decisions based on a bottle and a label, so you're choosing whichever brand is appealing to you. But I guess the recommendation would be to do blind tastings, try a bunch of different whiskies, blended Scotch, blended malt, single malt, and just base it on flavour, whichever one you prefer, and then explore that category and see whether or not, you know, there are brands out there, the stories that you like. And I would do it that way rather than falling in love with a brand or a label. But the marketing people are very clever. That's what they're good at.
Yeah, you touched on another important issue about the design of the bottle. Do you think that matters? That people still choose a whiskey for the design of the bottle or the label?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It does matter.
I wasn't going to disagree with you. Okay. Jeez, relax. So I was never a bartender, I'm afraid. I don't have your expertise. I never worked in a bar. So I came through the job I'm in now through 40 years of working in the business side of the business, if you know what I mean. I was in, and including in a brand management marketing role. And there's no doubt about it that we spend a lot of our time in marketing departments, navel gazing, looking down at our navels and wondering if we're doing the right thing. But bottles and labels do matter. People, especially now, and I'll tell you why, it's not so much I like the look of it, but if it's interesting, that's one thing. But if I pick it up, I want to read information that informs me. And that's again the inquiring minds of consumers and bartenders and other people. If I can learn from the label, that's very important. So bottles and labels do matter. If it's a nice bottle to pick up and to pour from, that's helpful. If it fits in the well in the US, that works, etc. But you want to feel good about the bottle you're picking up. And if the appearance and the information you can get from it helps in that way, then for obvious reasons, marketing people are making sure that it's as good as it can be.
I have to confess, I like the little monkeys. I would buy it just for the little monkeys, yeah.
That's quite sad.
Yeah, I know. But for instance, maybe the Grant's bottle is the one that has changed less.
I mean, the bottle's going to catch your eye, isn't it? And the Grant's bottle's always had that triangular shape, yeah, with a bunch of stories connected to the triangular shape. So when you go to bed, the bottle doesn't roll out and fall. You know, it stays under the pillow. Yeah. But
that's a good point.
But don't let facts get in the way of a good story. Thank you, Mitch. No, I think that it is key, and with the Grant's bottle, it's always had that triangular shape, and it feels and looks a lot better. I think before with the old bottle, it kind of blended into the back bar, and it sort of disappeared, whereas now it feels a bit stronger, and it shouts out. And the same thing can be said if you go to a bar, and it just catches your eye, you'll ask to see it. That's the initial bit. It's a few seconds that catches your eye, then you read the information, and you find out about it. So I do believe it is incredibly important how that bottle looks and feels.
So do you think that their brands should all have triangular bottles?
No, that's our thing. Some of them put it in square bottles for some weird reasons.
I think they don't agree with you with the triangular shape. No, but it's probably Grant's. It's probably the, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the most selling whiskey in Portugal.
Number one, yeah.
Number one, is it right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do to change this? Yeah.
Yeah, John, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So where do I start? No, look, we're in Portugal now.
Yeah.
Meet the bon. And everybody in Portugal knows that Grant's is the biggest selling whiskey in Portugal. Great. But if you were in another country, like if you were in Czech Republic, I pick a market. Just as it happens, there's another Irish whiskey, a well-known Irish whiskey called ours, which is the biggest selling. So if you were in Prague today, people would be talking about whatever. Every market has its history, its legacy as to why one brand is bigger than another. And sometimes it is marketing. Sometimes there's no doubt about it. But Glenfiddich is the biggest selling malt whiskey in the world. Fine. So, is it because it's been around the longest? Yes, probably. Also, does it taste? Is it the best tasting single malt? Of course. Of course. But it's just that there's a legacy for every brand, and it might be the consumers love it more. It might be that it's just been a traditional brand in that market, or for whatever reason. So, I'm not after his business.
I think as well within the whiskey business is an interesting one, because I think you look at something like vodka, you look at something like gin, it's very cutthroat. It's not like that within the whiskey business. We're all very good friends. We all hang out. We all drink each other's drams.
So you are friends and they hate each other? Is that?
The vodka guys do, yeah.
The vodka guys only.
Just the vodka guys.
Just the vodka.
No, it's just that we hate them.
But one of the things I always say is if someone's drinking whiskey, I'm a happy man. If they're drinking Glenfiddich, it's a bonus for me. So
yeah, so we're even though we all work on our individual brands, we're actually all advocating whiskey as a product and a drink, regardless of where it's from or who makes it. Every category you should be exploring and identifying and enjoying the best, in your opinion, and the best brands that you can. And I guess advocating like one spirit type is what we all do, overarching, like the individual brands that we represent.
Yeah, I'm going to say something here. I'm always, okay.
Don't disagree?
No, not at all. Au contraire. So, being around a long time in the business, I've noticed a lot of changes. But I'll tell you one thing that really, I wouldn't say bothers me, but it worries me slightly, is that if I produce a complicated blend of 3 Irish whiskies in one, and I lay it down in different casks in dark aromatic warehouses for 12 years, I can charge 35 euros for a bottle of that, okay? 12 years later, maybe 45, okay. If I produce a white spirit today and I put it into a bottle tomorrow, I can feckin' charge 50 euros. Are you kidding me? Seriously, it's gone in one end of the pipe, it's come out the other end, it goes into a bottle. 12 years ago, I made my whiskey, and I can't charge as much as I can for that bloody gin.
So you think the older the better?
Oh, I wouldn't say the older the better. No. I mean, when it comes to people, obviously yes. But no. I'm simply saying it's amazing to me how, as whiskey people, we look at our business and we look at, the whiskey going, the Angel's Share, etc., and somebody comes out with a bottle that looks really weird in shape or color and has a clear liquid inside, and they can charge twice the price. Seriously?
I think that's probably a little unfair, because we all know that the government likes to take a massive slice of each of these. So there's, most of that cost of all of our booze, all of our spirits are going to go straight to them. The duty is very, very high. In the UK, I think it's about £12 or something like that. £8 for every bottle that you buy will actually go to, the government. Which,
but also for whiskey and anything, the alcohol percentage is the same. So look, I'm in awe of Coco that he can charge such a high price.
We're going to check if we have some questions for you guys on the Slido.com. We're going to just jump into it right now, before we go to lunch, of course, and we can drink afterwards, not before. So, from Vivaldo, whiskey and Coke is a classic. What would be a new classic ingredient to use in a whiskey drink? The guys who love mixing.
I mean, whiskey and Coke's been around for a bloody long time.
Play with it in a different way, but drink your whiskey how you enjoy it.
Yeah, I think we're all advocates of that, and it's well, I say we're all advocates of that. Probably John Quinn's the only one that's not. There's two things that John Quinn likes naked. First one is whiskey. The second one is a sheep.
Oh, that is not true. I don't like my whiskey naked.
But no, I remember going into a bar and someone ordered a Lagavulin and Coke, and the bartender turned around and said, "I'm not doing that to my Lagavulin." And I kind of thought, like, dude, you need to get over yourself. If someone wants to drink it that way, you need to allow them to drink it that way. We don't have a snobbery about it. We're the people that are talking about it. We work for the companies that make it. If we don't have that snobbery, why should a bartender? So, you know, I think when it comes down to whiskey, you guys do what you want to it. We don't.
I think the question here was trying to focus on which new classic
So
you think it
I was going to answer the question.
Oh,
I think what's the next thing? Honestly, I think it's going to be tonic. Okay, I've actually started drinking Tullamore and tonic, and it's absolutely amazing. And I've introduced it to a few people, and I never would have put a mixer in my whiskey before. But now, with tonic, it's actually really good. It's really good.
Okay, so we have your advice. Another question from the same guy, the anonymous guy. You're in front of a client. What's more important, your knowledge or skills?
Skills all the way.
Skills all the way.
Yeah, I think, you know, when it's, for me, when I'm talking to people, I don't want to talk at them. I want to have that conversation. Knowledge is important, don't get me wrong, but I think you have to know your audience. There's no point in going into a room with people who know absolutely nothing about whiskey and talking about chill filtration and talking about, you know, all this kind of, exactly. You just lose them straight away. So for me, that knowledge is, you have to use that very delicately when you're talking about whiskey, because you can turn people off very, very easily.
You all agree?
I would say you have to have the skill to share your knowledge. If you have knowledge and you can't share it, it's not great. If you're able to talk, but you don't have the knowledge to back it up, that's a pity.
Yeah, okay. So you have to work with both ways. I think, we have more questions, Social networks from Vivaldo again. Who's this guy, Vivaldo? Where is Vivaldo? A big applause for him, Vivaldo. The man asking the questions. Social networks, how to best use it for a bar and what to avoid.
Well, you should start by using it in a bar when you're with your friends, because it's like anti-social media sometimes. You know, we're sat, you see people in a bar and there's 8 of them and they haven't seen each other in ages, and all they're doing is talking to everyone that isn't there, and it seems a bit weird. But I think you're more talking about how the bar uses it. Is that correct?
Yeah, to communicate
so I mean, it's a big world out there. There's like 325 million people on Instagram, for example, and it's a great way to promote your drinks and your styles. But I think people are just putting pictures up of drinks for just the pictures of drink's sake. I think it needs to really cut through and show what your bar's all about and what the personality of your menus and everything. It can't just be another picture of a Manhattan, for example. I think it's getting harder and harder to get noticed in that respect. The best way to get anyone's attention is by serving the drinks in the bar, you know?
Yeah.
Like going back to what they said before, the most important thing happening in the bar is in the bar.
So do you think that communicating a bar to future clients, the best way is like mouth to mouth? It's like you use that expression? Yeah.
Word of mouth.
Word to mouth, yeah. Now, mouth to mouth is breathing, yeah. It works too.
That's more like resuscitation, I guess.
Come to my bar.
After you drink a couple of, it changes from word to mouth to mouth to mouth.
If you're recommended something,
way, rather than social media or etc.
Personal recommendations are probably the reason I've been to most bars I've been to. If I go to another country, I'll turn around to any one of these guys and say, "Hey, I'm going here. I've never been here before." And before I know it, I'll have a list so long of bars to go and see and people to go and see for different reasons.
Okay, I think is it the last question we have? Yeah, is it the last question? Yeah, it is the last question we have. So a big round of applause for them, the whiskey panel. It was really good talking to you, and to you, of course. I would also like to thank Prime Drinks again for the invitation. Prime Drinks. And Garrafeira Soares, of course, again, Garrafeira Soares. And all the persons, of course, involved that made this event possible. So the time for talking is over. No, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. The least I expect is a bottle from each one of the brands. So I hope you guys took care of that. And I hope to see you next time, maybe next year. And cheers. We'll have. Thanks a lot.